Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Jagannath Jaya Baladeva Jaya Subhadramaya Jaya Gauranida Jaya Gauranida Jaya Gauranida Jaya Gauranida Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Sena Prabhupada Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Ashtatara Sadashi Shrimati Divine Grace of Bhaktivedanta Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Gopinath Bhagavan Ki Jai जगन्नाथ बलदेव सुभद्रा महारानी की जय, श्री श्री गौर निताय भगवान की जय, अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय, निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरे हरि बोल। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तमा श्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्ठकी। Hare Krishna. We are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto number 4, chapter number 1, the genealogical table of the daughters of Manu, text number 23 to 27. Okay, 23 is on the board. Tat pradurbhava samyoga. Tat pradurbhava samyoga. Vidyotitamanamuni. Vidyotitamanamuni. Uttishtanekapalena. Uttishtanekapalena. Dadasha vibudharshabham. Dadasha vibudharshabham. Tatpradurbhava samyoga. Vidyotitamanamuni. Uttishtanekapalena. Dadasha vibudharshabham. Tatpradurbhava samyoga. Vidyotitamanamuni. Uttishta ekapadena. Dadasha vibudharshabham. Prabhus. Tatpradurbhava samyoga. Uttishtanekapalena. Dadasha vibudharshabham. Tatpradurbhava samyoga. Vidyotitamanamuni. Uttishtanekapalena. Vidyotitamanamuni. Uttishtanekapalena. Dadasha vibudharshabham. Mataji's. Tatpradurbhava samyoga. Vidyotitamanamuni. Uttishtanekapalena. Dadasha vibudharshabham. Tatpradurbhava samyoga. Vidyotitamanamuni. Utishtaneka padena Tadasha vibudharshabhan Tat pradurбhava samyoga Vidyodita manamuni Utishtaneka padena Tadasha vibudharshabhan Word for word, tat, there, pradurбhava, appearance, samyoga, simultaneously, vidyodita, enlightened, manaha, in the mind, munihi, the great sage, utishtan, being awakened, ekapadena, even on one leg, that harsha, saw, Vibhuda, demigods, Rishabhan, the great personalities. Translation by His Divine Grace of Haricharananda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Translation: the sage was standing on one leg, but as soon as he saw that the three deities had appeared before him, he was so pleased to see them all together that despite great difficulty he approached them on one leg. Text 24 at 227. I'll just chant quickly the purports. I'll go through translation and purport. Text 27. Pranamya dandavat bhumo upatashtyarhanjali Vrishahamsa suparnastan swai chinnaischa chinnitan. Translation: thereafter he began to offer prayers to the three deities who were seated on different carriers, a bull, a swan, and Garuda, and who held in their hands a drum, kushagrass, and a discus. The sage offered them his respects by falling down like a stick. Purport: Danda means a long rod, and Vat means like. Before a superior, one has to fall down on the ground just like a stick, and this sort of offering of respect is called Dandavat. Atri Rishi offered his respect to the three deities in that way. They were identified by their different carriers and different symbolic representations. In that connection, it is stated here that Lord Vishnu was sitting on Garuda, a big aquiline bird, and was carrying in his hand a disc. Brahma was sitting on a swan and had in his hand kushagrass, and Lord Shiva was sitting on a bull and carrying in his hand a small drum called Dhamaru. Atri Rishi recognized them by their symbolic representations and different carriers, and thus he offered them prayers and respects. Okay, I'll stop here. I'll address the purport, and if there's time, we'll continue. Om Jnanatimurandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padhan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakant Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sude Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Mukham karoti vachalam bhangam langayate girim yatkripattamaham vande Shri Gurun Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram. Hare Krishna. Okay, so we're continuing with this chapter on the genealogical table of the daughters of Manu. So, as we all know, we've come to a stage where now we are speaking about Atri Rishi and his wife. Does anyone remember his wife's name? Ansuya. So here it's mentioned that Atri Muni performed great sacrifices. Was it really Anasuya? Oh, it was okay. It was Anasuya. And who is Anasuya? Does anyone remember? Because suddenly we started talking about Swayambhu Manu and his 5 children, as Sabyasachi Prabhu said, dab up, right? Devuti Akuti Prasuti Uttanapadan Priyavata. So, how do we suddenly come to Anasuya and Atri? Who is Anasuya? What? Akuti's daughter. And who is Akuti? Manu's daughter. Okay, good. Just testing you. And Akuti's husband? Ruchi? Okay, everyone's awake. Sometimes Srimad Bhagavatam is like that. If you don't read in a flow, and if you don't read consistently, you get lost. Because Srimad Bhagavatam is giving us a very broad understanding, a very, not broad understanding, rather, it's on a macroscopic scale. It's a very large scale. We're dealing with the beginning or the origin of, at least in this material world, of all praja or all living entities and the bodies that they get in this material world. And it's very interesting to understand that Swayambhu Manu is in such a wonderful position. In fact, Lord Brahma and everyone on that platform are in a great position. Why? Because Swayambhu Manu's grandfather is who? Garbhodakashaya Vishnu. And his father? Lord Brahma, Gunavatar. And he has brothers, another Gunavatar. Who is that? Lord Shiva. And then he has a Saktivesh avatar as a brother as well. Who? Narad Muni. Okay? And then he has a son, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. Who? Yagna, because he took his grandson and took him as his son. And also as a grandson, who does he have? Another grandson? Lord Kapila. And then as a great-grandson? Sorry? Dhruva is... no. Sorry? Does anyone know? Great-grandson. No? You'll see the partial expansions coming soon. Okay? So the sons of Atri Rishi will be there. That Lord Vishnu gives Jatatraya as his partial representation. So you can see Manu is in a very fortunate position that his family life is surrounded by Krishna. There are personalities that he can absorb his consciousness into simply thinking about Krishna and his relationship with Krishna. He can think of Krishna as his maintainer. He can think of Krishna as a relative. He can think of Krishna as someone who needs to be protected. This is Swayambhu Manu's position, a very exalted position. And then when we're talking about great personalities that come from Lord Manu and his whoever he progenies, then we can understand their caliber as well. In fact, it's quite interesting because on that platform, the rules and regulations that pertain to human beings, such as us on the material platform, don't exist. Lord Brahma's body is completely and purely on the subtle platform. That's why in the second canto, when you read about Lord Brahma creating, when he gave up his body, he gave up that particular thought or consciousness. But that doesn't mean that he did not have a body. So it's a very fluid, constant state on the subtle platform. It's very hard for us to perceive. So when we see or hear about, say for example, Yagya and his wife, Dakshina, being of the same relation, then we can understand from the example of Mahabharata that the demigods have very powerful cities that enable them to procreate without having to procreate in the gross way in which we do it on this platform of the material existence, in this earthly planet. For example, when we hear about Kunti, when she got the Kunti Maharani, she got the mantra from Durvasa Muni. She thought she saw the sun, and then she thought she would test it. And when she tested it, Lord Suryadev appeared in front of her. And she said that I was just testing it. Like, I don't want any children right now. I was just testing it. If you give me a child, then I will not be able to get married, and I'll be outcast in society. And he said that once the mantra is chanted, it cannot go in vain. It needs to be fulfilled. That is the verdict. So then he said that I will arrange in such a way that you will get a child, but it will be born from the ear. So you will maintain your celibacy. So it's mentioned, if you hear about, I think it's, I've forgotten the name of the Prabhu from Chapati, but he's given a series on Mahabharata and the controversies of Mahabharata. And if you read about that, if you hear that, he explains the same point, that demigods procreate in a totally different way than we can perceive. What to speak of their predecessors? Completely different platform. In fact, it's from Manu that comes all of these rules and regulations that we follow as Manusya, as human beings on this planet. So their platform is totally different. So when we hear about Atri Rishi, and then we hear about how Prabhupada says that he worshipped the Supreme Personality Godhead, but without an understanding of who it is. And he worships saying that, please, I want a son like you. And then we immediately hear that Prabhupada says in the purport that Atri Muni is not considered to be such a great, such a pure devotee. This is in text 20. In the purport, Prabhupada is saying here, Atri Muni wanted a son exactly like the Lord, and therefore he's not supposed to have been a pure devotee, because he had a desire to be fulfilled, and that desire was material. But that does not give us license to pull him down to our level. Atri Muni is in such an exalted level, being entrusted with procreating this material world by Lord Brahma himself. Do we have that qualification? It is a high level of Krishna consciousness that one needs to exhibit to be able to give in such service. So Atri Muni, although he's not considered a pure devotee, in fact, it's mentioned early on when Vasudeva and Devaki, in their previous lives, correct me if I'm wrong, they had asked the Lord to appear, had the Lord appear like their son, or had a son like the Lord, is that correct? And it's Jonah and Narad, who was Vasudeva and, Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda, who wanted the Lord himself as their son. So there Prabhupada makes the point in the 10th canto that this is not exactly a pure desire to have someone like the Lord to be one's son. Rather, one should have the Lord as their son. That should be the desire. To render service to the Lord, that is a pure desire. So when we talk about pure devotional service, elsewhere Prabhupada says that when they're on a morning walk, someone asks Prabhupada that, Prabhupada, how many pure devotees are there in the world? And Prabhupada turns to him and says, how many devotees are there in our society? Right? And this is early ISKCON days. So Prabhupada writes that pure devotional service doesn't, at least, should refer to one's giving up of one's sense enjoyment and engaging in Krishna service. Simply thinking of Krishna's senses. Krishna Indriya Priti. And it's quite interesting if you listen to the Nectar of Devotion lectures by Prabhupada. Prabhupada gives this great concession that he says anyone who simply thinks of Krishna's service and only of Krishna's service is a pure devotee. They may not be of a high standard or a caliber of understanding of Krishna's position. They may not be fully, strong or fixed in the Shastra. Because, as mentioned, that there are 3 stages of advancement. There's the Kanishta, Madhyama and the Uttama. And these stages are given according to one's strength of faith and according to one's understanding or knowledge of the Vedic Shastra, of the Bhagavad Dharma, of understanding of Krishna's position. So these two things dictate, because it's mentioned, Kanishta means one who's very pliable in faith. Komala Shraddha is mentioned in Chaitanya Charitamrita by Mahaprabhu himself. That faith is pliable. Such a person goes on the street and meets another person, and they'll speak whatever nonsense, and this person not having strong, or this devotee not having strong faith, not strong understanding in Krishna consciousness, will immediately be changed in consciousness. When one comes to the Madhyama platform, one's faith is stronger and one has more understanding of Shastra. But it's mentioned it's not very firm faith. It's not fixed fully. Like they can be defeated, but their faith is very strong. They're very rigid in following Krishna's instructions. Whereas in the Uttamadhikari stage, nothing can deter them. Whether it may be philosophical debate or one's faith. It's completely fixed in Krishna's lotus feet. So you can see there's these type of gradations. But Prabhupada is saying one can still be a pure devotee and still be a Kanishta Adhikari. How? By simply thinking only of Krishna's pleasure, that's all. That is a pure devotee. So, although Achimuni may not be exactly a pure devotee and had some material desires, still the Lord appeared in front of him. And the Supreme Personality Godhead doesn't chooses who he appears in front of. He is not so cheap. The Supreme Lord is not so cheap. Prabhupada says, wherever I go, people ask me, where is God? Show me God. And Prabhupada says, you cannot even see your own eyes. What to speak of seeing God? God is not so cheap. It requires qualification to see the Lord. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur gives us the guiding light. We should not try to see Krishna. Rather, we should act in such a way that Krishna will want to see us. When you go in front of Radha Gopinath and take Shri Radha Gopinath and take darshan, actually we are standing in front of the Lord, and the Lord is we are trying to receive the benediction to be able to see the Lord. Because the Lord is not very easily perceived. He is known as Adbhokshaja. He is beyond our senses. So when he appears before Achimuni, how wonderful is Achimuni's position? So this is something we need to be careful of. That when Prabhupada talks about he's not supposed to have been a pure devotee because he had a desire to be fulfilled and that desire was material, still the Lord appeared before him. Has the Lord appeared before us? Yes and no. Yes, Shri Radha Gopinath is right here in front of us. But do we have the qualifications to see the Lord? No, simply by the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, by Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada's mercy, that we have the wonderful opportunity to associate and serve Shri Radha Gopinath. So my point I'm trying to make is that when we read this, we should not take it away from Achimuni, his position, his qualifications. He is an exalted personality. So now with today's verse, we are reading from 23 to 27. I'll see if I can get through the whole thing. There's a lot of different topics, a lot of different themes. But here, after Achimuni has followed the order of Lord Brahma to procreate, he has decided to take his wife Anusurya and perform severe penances and austerities to be able to become qualified to produce the proper children. Ramai Maharaj was reading before, Prabhupada was mentioning that when the household life is proper and the relationship between husband and wife is proper, then the progeny is good. It's of a good caliber. It's known as Garbhadhan Samskar. So in this way, Achimuni and Anusuya were performing this tapasya. Although we hear of Achimuni performing tapasya, you can also understand that Anusuya was also performing tapasya, following the footsteps of her husband. Just as we see Devahuti, she served Kardama Muni, who was performing his tapasya and austerities. So once the Supreme Lord was pleased, it's mentioned that when he was performing his tapasya, he was so absorbed, so fixed, that a fire emanated from his body. But that fire was not a normal fire. It was the fire of mental satisfaction. So in other words, it was something so powerful that it attracted the super soul within his heart. And that super soul, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then went and brought Brahma and Lord Shiva. And so all three of them came before Atri Muni. And what was Atri Muni's prayers? Does anyone remember? He was just simply thinking, may this Lord of the universe, of whom I have taken shelter, kindly be pleased to offer me a son exactly like him. A vague prayer. A prayer to the Supreme Lord, but it wasn't directed very specifically to Krishna. Later on in one section, we also hear about a similar type of prayer. Does anyone know? That where a devotee offers the prayers, but it's a very generic prayer. It's not specifically to a form of the Lord. Does anyone know? Or remember? Or at least it's okay, I take a step back. Gajendra offers his prayers, but it's mentioned that his prayers were to the Supreme Lord, whoever it may be. Because he, as in the body of an elephant, simply remembered the prayers from his previous life, to whom he could not remember, he could not perceive. But the Lord was so pleased with him that he came before him. In the same way, Krishna is appearing before Atri Muni. In the early days, Prabhupada mentions in a lecture that when he, of course, throughout his manifest lila and unmanifest, when we read his purports and hear his lectures, Prabhupada often says that when we chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, when we pronounce it, we should pronounce it very clearly and loudly. But still, sometimes people don't chant the holy name properly. But does that mean that the Lord doesn't hear? Does that mean that the Lord doesn't reciprocate? Just like a child will call for the mother, but in broken language, the mother will attend and reciprocate with the child. Similarly, Krishna reciprocates with his devotees. So it's mentioned that Prabhupada says, sometimes my disciples call me Guru instead of Guru. Does anyone know what Guru means? It means cow, because of a slight mispronunciation. Still, Prabhupada says, I don't take offense. I understand that they're calling me. So in the same way, the Lord is he's not so cheap, but he's easily accessible. This is the wonderful contradictions that exist within Krishna. The wonderful inconceivable nature of Krishna. That although he's so hard to reach, that's pantastu koti sata pantastu koti sampravayur. That Lord Brahma's praise that even though, and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur translates, that the yogis, no matter how much they try to drill their respiratory system, also known as pranayama, that no matter how much they travel on the strength or the speed of the mind, they'll never be able to achieve the abode or be able to come to Krishna. But it's easy for Vedyesha Durlavam Adurlavam Atma Bhakto. It's very easy for the devotee. So Atri Muni, after he offers this prayer, still the Supreme Personality of Godhead appears, but he wanted to teach a lesson. He came with two other personalities. In total, the Guna avatars appeared before Atri Muni. The Guna avatars of the Lord appeared before Atri Muni. It's not an ordinary scene, not an ordinary affair. It's very, very important. Of course, why would Bhagavatam mention it otherwise? Right? So 23, because he was standing on one leg performing austerities, he saw them. And as soon as he saw them, he was very pleased within the heart. But with great difficulty, he approached them hopping on one leg. He did not give up his austerity. That's how absorbed and determined and I guess in one sense, in a good way, he was conditioned to it. So that when he approached the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the Guru avatars, then he paid obeisances like a stick. Not that Dandavad Pranam, Prabhuji Mataji, Dandavad Pranam. Actually, Prabhupada says in Chaitanya Charitamrita that when Mahaprabhu comes to visit Rupa Goswami while he's staying in Puri, and Rupa Goswami has written the verse that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, only Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Swarup Damodar know the meaning of, that he has rewritten it and paraphrased it in a nice verse. And when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu reads it and goes to ecstasy, Rupa Goswami comes back to his kutir after taking a shower, and he sees Mahaprabhu and pays dandavats. And then Prabhupada says this is the standard that one should follow when meeting one's superiors. That it's known as Ashtanga. The 8 limbs of the body are touching the floor and you're paying obeisances to the superior. Dandavat means like a stick. In another place, in 10th canto, it's mentioned that when Lord Brahma, all those who have read will remember these small points, that Lord Brahma, when he pays obeisances to Lord Krishna after stealing the cowherd boys and then realizing Krishna's position, he pays obeisances and his foreheads touch Krishna's lotus feet. And there Sukadeva Goswami mentions like a golden rod. Because Lord Brahma, it's mentioned that because of his helmet and his bodily complexion, he was goldish in complexion. And when he paid obeisances, it was like a golden rod. So here you can understand how important it is to receive a superior. Therefore, when we come to the temple room, we pay obeisances. Okay? So dandavat means a long rod, vat means like. So danda and vat, like a long rod. And Prabhupada saying that he, Atri Rishi, was able to offer respect to 3 deities and he recognized them. How? Symbolic representations. Just as every person, every individual has characteristics, so do the 3 Gunavatars. And does anyone remember what's mentioned as, it's not on the board so I can ask. What are the symbolic representations given? We'll start with Lord Vishnu. Does anyone remember what we read? Say it again. Discus, the disc, yes. And Garuda. Prabhupada says a big aquiline bird. Does anyone know what an aquiline bird is? When we come across words like this in Bhagavatam, Prabhupada hasn't just simply put the word there. It's mentioned Prabhupada used to think very clearly a long period of time. Shuddhagiri Prabhu is this, his personal servant mentions in his book. What is the difficulty? He mentions there that sometimes Prabhupada would just simply sit there. He would just simply sit there and think of the right word to put. And sometimes it's mentioned that Prabhupada wouldn't progress much because he's simply thinking of the right word to put for our benefit. So this word, big aquiline bird, is not there arbitrarily. Then Prabhupada says, yeah, let's put this, sounds good, let's put it in there. Aquiline means, you know the hooked beak? You know how eagles have a hooked beak? They are the birds with the, like you see the pigeons and the mayas all here around the temple, they have a sharp beak that goes out. Hooked beak goes like that. So you see that in the eagles and the hawks and those type of birds. So Garuda has a beak like that. Okay, so that's what it means as an aquiline bird. Okay, so that's Lord Vishnu. How about Lord Brahma? Somebody else. Yes, Prabhu. Mataji's? Swan, his carrier, and what was he holding? Kusha grass, yes, not just any grass. Kusha grass. It's mentioned Kusha grass is the most purified substance to be used in Vedic sacrifice. If you just simply sit on Kusha grass, everything is most pure. Most pure. Okay, so Lord Shiva, easy. Bull, yes, and then what was he holding? Damaru. Not trident, it's mentioned Damaru. That small drum. So it's mentioned that Atri recognized them by their symbolic representations and different carriers, and thus he offered them prayers and respects. So he knew who they were. But as we will come to see, he still did not know who of them was actually the origin. Anadir Adi Govindam. He still did not know. There was still a lack of knowledge from his part. Still, when they appeared before him, this is text 25, Translation: Achimuni was greatly pleased to see that the three devas were gracious towards him. His eyes were dazzled by the effulgence of their bodies, and therefore he closed his eyes for the time being. Purport: since the deities were smiling, he could understand that they were pleased with him. Their glaring bodily effulgence was intolerable to his eyes, so he closed them for the time being. Text 26 to 27. Translation: but since his heart was already attracted by the deities, somehow or other he gathered his senses, and with folded hands and sweet words he began to offer prayers to the predominating deities of the universe. The great sage Atri said, O Lord Brahma, Lord Vishnu and Lord Shiva, you have divided yourself into three bodies by accepting the three modes of material nature, as you do in every millennium for the creation, maintenance and dissolution of the cosmic manifestation. I offer my respectful obeisances unto all of you, and beg to inquire whom of you three have I called by my prayer. Can you imagine that? You call someone to your home and say, which one of you did I call? So this is actually Muni's position. We'll read the purport. Purport explains this a bit more clearly because it's a bit confusing. You can understand Krishna he enjoys his pastimes. The way he does things nobody can understand, and he enjoys doing it the way he does it. Purport: Atrishi called for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Jagat Ishvara, the Lord of the universe. The Lord must exist before the creation, otherwise how could he be its Lord? Very simple logical point. How can someone consider to be controller of something unless they're there before it existed? Right? Very simple logical point. If someone constructs a big building, this indicates that he must have existed before the building was constructed. Therefore, the Supreme Lord, the Creator of the universe, must be transcendental to the material modes of nature. Okay, just hold that point. Okay, the Supreme Lord must be transcendental to the material modes of nature. But it is known that Vishnu takes charge of the mode of goodness, Brahma takes charge of the mode of passion, and Lord Shiva takes charge of the mode of ignorance. Of those who have read Srimad Bhagavatam, do you remember coming across or thinking that it's mentioned that Lord Shiva is in ignorance, Lord Brahma is in passion, Lord Vishnu is in goodness? Can anyone remember any section like that? Can anyone remember any misconception like that? No? Yeah, so it's a very important point to note. They take charge of the modes. To take charge of the modes doesn't mean that they're affected by the modes. We have to be very careful, otherwise they wouldn't be called Gunavatars. They'd be conditioned souls like us. Okay, so that they're in charge. They take charge of the modes. Therefore, Achimuni said that Jagat Ishvara, the Lord of the universe, must be one of you. But since three of you appeared, I cannot recognize who I have called. You are also kind. Please let me know who is actually Jagat Ishvara, the Lord of the universe. In fact, so that's his prayer. This Prabhupada continuing. In fact, Atri Rishi was doubtful about the constitutional position of the Supreme Lord Vishnu, but he is quite certain that the Lord of the universe cannot be one of the creatures created by Maya. His very inquiry about whom he had called indicates that he was in doubt about the constitutional position of the Lord. Therefore he prayed to all three, kindly let me know who is the transcendental Lord of the universe. He was certain, of course, that not all of them could be the Lord, but the Lord of the universe was one of the three. So Achimuni is a Brahmana. He's not a fool or a rascal. He's a Brahmana, right? He has knowledge. Brahma Janatiti, Brahmana. One who knows about Brahman, he's a Brahmana. But you see here, Prabhupada very easily clarifies the situation. He was in doubt. That's his position. He knows who Brahma is. He knows who Lord Shiva is. He knows who Lord Vishnu is. He knows all of them. He knows what they do. He knows what their position is. But he's in doubt still. He's in doubt that he doesn't know which one of them is actually the controller of the universe, Jagat Ishvara. And if you continue reading this section, all three of them actually go along with it. They actually don't tell him who they don't tell him who the actual Jagadishvara is. They said, we are just simply pleased, and all three must represent the Jagadishvara. So therefore we are pleased to give you a son, a partial representation of us, and then they disappear. That's it. So later on in a purport to come, Prabhupada says, you can take from this lesson that the Lord reciprocates as you render service unto Him. Ye yata mam prapadyante tamstatevya bhajamyaham. To the extent Archarishi engaged in service to the Supreme Lord, to that extent the Supreme Lord reciprocated with him. Therefore, what Prabhupada mentioned before about him not being such a pure devotee, having material desires, is justified. Right? Because later on, what happens when Dhruva Maharaj sees the Supreme Personality of Godhead after performing similar tapasya, the Lord is so pleased with him, because he followed Narada Muni. He was pleased with him that he touched the conch shell on his head, and he immediately understood the position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, ye yata mam prapadyante tamstatevya bhajamyaham. Very important point to remember. To the degree we render service to the Lord, to that degree the Lord reciprocates. In fact, it's even more, the scale is tipped more to our side, because the Lord reciprocates many fold. Prabhupada says his father used to tell him that Krishna has many hands. So if you want to hold something back, take something away, how you can stop Krishna? Krishna will take everything away from you. Right? And if Krishna wants to give, how we can hold that much? But Krishna will give like that. So Krishna will give, it's, as we hear, you take one step towards him, he takes many steps towards you. Krishna is extremely kind, that even recently we were hearing, I've forgotten who, I think it was Sabyasachi Prabhu was mentioning, that Krishna desires us to go back ahead more than we do. So you can understand the scale is more tipped to our side, it's our benefit. We are more the beneficiary than Krishna in one sense. He is giving us so much credit, so much mercy. And that all we have to do is a little service, especially in this day and age of Kali. Because Kalaya dosha nidhe rajan asti eko mahatguna. Krishna, kirtana deva Krishnasya mukta sangam param brajit. That mukta is not simply liberation as in freedom from material desires and hankerings and lamentation and going to Brahmajyoti and just existing in the spiritual world. That mukta sangam param brajit means that we associate with Krishna in his spiritual planets. Recently I was reading in Chaitanya Charitamrita, in Rupa Shiksha, when Mahaprabhu was teaching or instructing Rupa Goswami, it's mentioned that he's talking about Shantaras. It's mentioned that in the spiritual world there are 5 rasas. What are those 5 rasas? Shanta, Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, and Madhurya. Alright, and Prabhupada tells us this in the beginning of the introduction of Bhagavad Gita. He says that we have a constitutional position. And what is that constitutional position? What is our dharma? To be servant of Krishna. But in what capacity? It's one of these. One of these 5. That's our relationship with Krishna. Of course, there's many mixtures and so on and so forth. But the Lord, He expands Himself to reciprocate with us. He accepts many forms just to be able to reciprocate with us and our particular mood of worship. So, when the Lord, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was explaining what Santa Das is. Santa Ras is, or Santa Rati. And what Santa Rati is that when one no longer is attached to material existence, has no material desires, but is simply thinking or is attached to Krishna's lotus feet. But it's mentioned that they don't have a full understanding of Krishna's personal form, and so therefore they know of Brahman, they know of Paramatma, but they are unable to know of Bhagavan fully. It's only when one comes to Dasya, when one wants to render service to the Lord, then one is able to understand the personal feature of the Lord Bhagavan. So a very interesting distinction that Mahaprabhu was giving there. So when we desire, our desires should be very careful. careful. We should be careful with our desires, that we don't think, let me be freed from this material situation. Let me be freed from this material anxiety. Let me be freed from this lamentation and hankering. Rather, our desire should be, how can I use this situation to better please Krishna? Our consciousness should be so geared that should be anya abhyasita sunyam. That should be free from karma, jnana, yoga. It should be free from all types of material desire. It should simply be geared towards thinking of how to serve Krishna. To the extent that Chaitanya Charitamrita explains that when a devotee wants, a pure devotee wants to not serve Krishna, their mind forces them to serve Krishna. Amazing, right? In our position, what is that? You don't want to serve Krishna, mind takes us through so many different lifetimes before we come back. That's our position. Therefore, it's mentioned that Sarvapadi Muktam Tat Paratvena Nirmalam. Rishikesha Rishikena Sevanam Bhakti Uchate. That we must be ready to give up this Sarva Upadi. All these designations. And what should we only think of? We are a servant of Krishna. That Krishna has put me in such a position with his devotees that they may be here as my wife, my children, my son, my husband. They may appear as the devotees that live with me in the ashram, but still my position is that of a servant of Krishna. And Krishna is so kind that he has given me the association of his devotees. To the extent that even a spiritual master thinks that my spiritual master has sent all these devotees to assist me in his service. Right? Prabhupada thought simply like that when every of his disciples. And Prabhupada many occasions would tell that, that don't mind, it is my duty as spiritual master to correct you. In many situations, Prabhupada would say that after chastising his disciples. So, you can understand our position is that we need to always remember our constitutional position and by Prabhupada's mercy, the constitutional position of Krishna. We should never be in a doubtful position. For being in a doubtful position means there will be no peace and no happiness. And the reason why we find it difficult sometimes to practice Krishna consciousness is because of these doubts within the heart. And they need to be eradicated. By rendering service, Syan Mahat Sevya Vipra, by rendering service unto the devotee, naturally the heart becomes cleansed and one is able to understand Krishna Katha. Understand who is Krishna and understand his qualities and pastimes. In the beginning, we just simply think, okay, Krishna appeared, Krishna disappeared. Krishna appeared, Krishna disappeared. This devotee prayed, that devotee prayed, and okay, finished, Bhagavatam's done. Then over a period of time, when you read, then you see the details, and the details, and the details, and the details, and they keep going on and on and on. To the extent that Prabhupada taught us by example that he would read his own books. One time Shruti Prabhu came to Prabhupada's room and Prabhupada was reading Nectar Devotion. And Prabhupada was saying, actually he's reading Krishna book at that time, and he tells, these books are so nice that if one simply reads this book, that they'll go back to Godhead. Then another instance, somewhere, another place in the world, Prabhupada was reading Nectar Devotion. And Shruti Prabhu came into the room. And what did Prabhupada say? These books are so nice that if you just simply read this one book, you'll go back home, back to Godhead. So what this Prabhupada was teaching, Shruti Prabhu was saying that we should read these books. we just simply read the books again and again and again. We need to understand, it's mentioned that the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, think about this practically, if we were to be there with the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, they hardly ate and slept. That too for maybe 2 hours, and palm full of milk, bottled milk, or it's mentioned in some place, some of the Goswamis only ate a couple of chickpeas. That's it. And that too they had to be reminded to eat. Right? We have to remind the Bhagavatam speaker, Prabhu, we need to eat. Right? So our position is, okay, we'll go to the 6 Goswamis first. Okay, so that's what, 22 hours in a day they have? And of the 22 hours, what's mentioned? Sankhya Purva Ganadi Adivi. It's mentioned that they counted their rounds. So they were chanting their rounds. they were chanting and dancing, and they were discussing Krishna Katha 22 hours a day, if not 24. Okay? And it's mentioned that they would sit down together and discuss and describe the qualities and the pastimes of Sri Krishna. And how many years did they live? How many days did they have? And they used to sit under a different tree every single day, and they used to do the same activity. They're not mad people. Okay? They were people of such high caliber. Still, they were relishing Krishna consciousness. Why? Because it is such a great dearth of knowledge, of understanding of Krishna's qualities, that you can not enjoy in our sense not, but rather you can derive great taste and relish simply by remembering Krishna's pastimes and his characteristics and qualities. That you remember how kind Krishna was to Lord Indra, even after he performed such nonsense activities. It's mentioned, you know how nonsense Indra was? That he was so careful not to put even a drop of water in Mathura because he was scared of Kamsa. But he put everything in Vrindavan. That was how rascal he was in one sense. That he was scared of Kamsa, that not even one drop went there. But he was ready to offend the devotees of the Lord. Sometimes we see that mentality come in us. That we'll see, in the name of social etiquette, so-called social etiquette, public opinion, we'll do so many things and say so many things. But then we will compromise the standard of devotional service. We will minimize the nature of devotees. So, still, Krishna was so kind to Lord Indra. Right? Can you imagine if someone destroyed you, trying to destroy your house, your people, your animals, your possessions, what would you do? But Krishna was so kind. So the Goswamis, the Mahabhagavatas, they were able to just relish Krishna consciousness. They were able to just take even just one pastime of the Lord and simply become merged in an ocean of ecstasy. And it's mentioned that they simply discuss about Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as well. And it's mentioned in Chaitanya Charitamrita. You think it's such a big book? Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says that I cannot describe everything that Mahaprabhu did. If I did, it becomes so voluminous. In fact, even Lord Ananta is still writing books about this. It's mentioned there. Not only is he speaking, he never come to an end of the amount of books he'd be able to write about the glories of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There is so much to understand. And therefore, Vyasadeva has given us the Srimad Bhagavatam. Prabhupada has given us all of these books to read. That Prabhupada says that even if you try to get to the end of reading all of these books, it'll probably be your lifetime. Of course, if you don't manage a lifetime, you can do much more. And if you simply read Prabhupada's books, that is sufficient. There is nothing more that is required. You don't need to know anything else. Everything there you need to know will be taught to you personally, hand-fed to you by Srila Prabhupada, if you simply associate with him every day by reading his books. And naturally, you won't be in this position that Atri is in. In fact, you'll be in such a glorious, exalted position that you'll be able to come, and we are doing every day, coming before the Lord and chanting, Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Prabhupada says, in one place, Shrutagiri was mentioning, he was with Prabhupada. Prabhupada suddenly said, this is the pride of the devotee. Suddenly, they're sitting in a garden, I think it's in Dwarka, and Prabhupada is just simply sitting there, and he's looking at the devotees, and suddenly he says, this is our pride, that Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. We are proud to be servants of that Govinda. So these feelings, these attachments to the Lord need to be developed. And Mahaprabhu mentions in the beginning of Rupa Shiksha that this attachment gradually needs to be developed. It's not immediately like that. Right? Let's try again. It doesn't immediately come like that. Why? Because then it's just cheap. It's a relationship that comes gradually. But when it comes, it stays. And it becomes more and more sweet. The example Mahaprabhu gives is of sugar cane. You have sugar cane, you crush it, you get the juice of sugar cane. You boil that, you get molasses. It's even more sweet. You boil that, and then you get sugar. And then like that again, you refine more. You get sugar candy. And again, you will find that you get lozenges. And that's very, very sweet. So in the same way, one's attachment, it gradually comes to the point of prema, shraddha to prema. And I'll end with this point. How does it start? If you go to the beginning of this shiksha, of this instruction, Mahaprabhu is explaining, Brahmanda Bhavite Kuma Bhagyavan Jeev, Guru Krishna Prasad Pai, Bhakti Latha Beach. It begins here, that by the mercy of Krishna, you get Guru, and by the mercy of Guru, you get? Wrong, you get the Bhakti Latha Beach. That is the beginning of getting Krishna. Of course, yes, you're correct, but according to this verse, no. So here, Bhakti Latha Beach. So, sorry, I was just joking. Of course, you get by the mercy of Krishna, you get Guru, and by the mercy of Guru, you get Krishna. So Bhakti Latha Beach comes. And what's the next verse straight after that? Does anyone remember? No? Mahaprabhu is telling everyone, Mali Haya Kare Se Bija Aropan Shravan Kirtana Jale Kare Sechan. What is he saying? This is the beginning of Rati. I'm bringing it back to this one point. It is the beginning of your attachment and your gradual affection for Gopinath increasing. What is it? Become a gardener. Malihaya Kareshe Bija Aropan. That means sow the seed. Become a gardener and sow the seed. Bija Aropan. Sow it. Then what you should do? Shravan Kirtan Jhale Kare Sechan. That you should water it with the process of hearing and chanting. And it's mentioned throughout that section, explains how the creeper grows and you should cut it away, cut all the weeds away, and how it can't take shelter of any tree in this material world but only at the lotus feet of Krishna, the greatest desire tree, the Kalpavriksha. Prabhupada says throughout that whole section that till the, not even when you reach Krishna Prema, that you stop. Shravan Kirtan Jale Kare Sechan. That sprinkling process goes on eternally. So, gradually, we should at least every day invest, slowly, water the seed of devotional service, of the creeper of devotional service within the heart, by constantly chanting and hearing about Krishna. So therefore, if we just simply attend or hear Srimad Bhagavatam every day, we are following the instructions and gradually our attachment to Krishna appears. So much to the extent that we won't struggle to find out who the Jagadishwara is. We'll know clearly that Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami, that we'll be proud to be devotees, proud to be the servants of Shri Shri Radha Gopinath, Shri Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra, and Shri Shri Gauranitai. And proud to be the servants of the servants of the servants of Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. It's over time, so I won't be taking any questions. Thank you very much. Gandhara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.